Yeah, I fucked that up. No. Fuck it, we'll keep going. I got the dog here today. We'll see how she interrupts us. Anyway, back to another episode of really bad reading stories out loud. And today we are going to be doing The Lady in Grey. This is book 3 of the Matter of series. This is Matter of Mayhem. This came out in like the early 90s, as you can tell, because this whole thing costs only $5, where probably today's it would be about 20. So yeah, Matter of Mayhem. There's your cover art. It's not my favorite cover art, but it's definitely up there. Anyway, here we go. The Lady in Grey, early Yarmouth Township in the 1700s. The mysterious folk tale of the Lady in Grey goes back to the time of the early settlers in Yarmouth County. Tradition has it that the ghostly apparition of a woman was seen floating eerily over the top of a swamp along the Moodsmill Road on only warm, moonlit spring evenings. In days of old, she was seen as a will-o'-the-wisp or a free spirit. Others saw her as an Acadian dressed lady with long gray skirt, cloak with a sunbonnet covering her head. The strangest thing about her is that she is known to be faceless. The mystery is that nobody knows if she was seeking her dead lost love or searching for hidden Acadian gold. The stories of hidden gold goes back to when Yarmouth County Acadians heard that the British were coming in the mid-17th century. British soldiers had cut a swath of looting, murder, and destruction among the Acadian settlements scattered throughout the Annapolis Valley. History has recorded how the British cruelly deported thousands of Acadians to the United States, burned their homes, and stole their money, lands, and goods. Fearing the worst, the Acadians living along the Tusket River and the area of Pumlico and Wedgeport collected their gold and other valuables and placed it in an old wooden chest. The amount of the gold is uncertain, but legend has it included gold candlestick, church utensils, along with their own possessions. The Acadians may have accumulated a lot of the gold because they were known to be engaged in various lucrative trades with Fortress Louisbourg. The Acadian settlers went to the old Indian Trail, which went in an easterly direction towards Tusket River from the modern Moodsmill Road. After following the river for a distance, they buried the chest under a big oak tree high up on a hill in a rich red-brown grave. Gravel. Jesus, this is why it's bad reading. A short time later, the British arrived. The tales suggested that the British and Acadians met each other at battle between them resulted as the tale suggested that the British and the Acadians met each other and a battle between them resulted. As a result, one of the young British soldiers lost his life. It is believed that the soldier who died was the fiancé of the Lady in Grey. Sadly, she would not accept the news of his tragic death. Years later, it was reported that an old man on the Moodsmill Road plowing up a rusted iron key and fork which had been obviously buried on the hill for years. This discovery suggested that it may have been the key to the missing chest of the Acadian gold. This story has been corroborated by Micmac legends circulating throughout the area. A half-breed Micmac known as Old Hitch was reported to be 120 years old. He told an old man to dig up the gold because Old Hitch was too scared of the little ghost lass, or the lady in grey. But the old man died a short time later, and it was never known if he had continued to seek the treasure. As for Old Hitch, no one is sure of his fate. Many of the residents claim to have seen the lady in grey. One woman recalls traveling along the road in an old convertible Model T Ford. As the car came under the wooded road, she claimed she saw the size, shape, and appearance of a woman in a long gray cloak and hood, traditional Acadian garb. She watched the lady in grey float across the swamp and disappear behind an old maple tree. Sometime later, a young couple, out for a romantic stroll on a moonlit night, saw the eerie figure float up from the swamp. As they walked past, they noted that she did not have a face. Then, as quickly as she emerged, the lady in grey disappeared. Another explanation is that the lady in grey was a nun or sister who wore a grey habit. According to the Roman Catholic Church, it is possible that a sister of this description could have been serving as a missionary to the Mi'kmaq and Acadians who were living in the area. It was suggested that she was fleeing the British soldiers when she was killed. Ever since then, another legend claims her ghost has roamed the area of the Moods Mill Road. Locals claim that the lady in the mist, or the lady in grey, apparition appears only when someone gets near to the missing Acadian treasure. It appears as if she safeguards it, and since the bulk of the treasure was made up of sacred church objects, this explanation may have some credibility. Another reason for appearance is a disturbance among the Acadian population. And finally, the lady in grey appears when historic areas are damaged or changed. It almost seems as if the lady in grey serves as a protector of the local Acadian culture. Today, skeptics believe the lady in grey can be explained as a ball of mist that rises from a swamp, a natural phenomenon. But to those who have seen her, she is much more than a ball of mist. The mystery of the lady in grey will continue to live in the hearts and minds of residents along the Moods Mill Road of Yarmouth County. All right, next. Whew, got a burp. All right, this is a bunch of little short stories. So we're going to start with this. General Secession of Yarmouth Township, 1700s to 1800s. From the record of the General Session of Peace. 1796. John Crawley, Samuel Marshall, James Kelly, Ronald McKinnon, Nathan Richards, Benon d'Entremont, and Joseph Frost presided as a justice at the General Session held in Yarmouth. Members of the grand jury held a case involving a citizen being charged with assault and battery. The records are scant, but a lawyer by the name of Pout managed to convince the grand jury to drop the battery charges and continue with the assault charge against the accused. The grand jury agreed the assault charge stood. At the trial, the petty jury found the accused guilty. Petty jury foreman Samuel Andrews delivered the guilty verdict to a court. The citizen was fined 1 shilling, which was not really a great deal of money. 1803. An interesting case that year involved a man from Halifax who was charged in Yarmouth with larceny. Larceny is theft or stealing. According to the scant records, this man was late of Halifax, not having the fear of God before his eyes, but moved by the integration of the devil, which was charged and found guilty of stealing goods and chattels, chattels, to the amount of 9 pence. The court ordered him to receive 39 lashings. This sentence was to be carried out at Vengeance House by the constable. In the order, it was stated that the accused was to be lashed at John Richards' Flagstaff. Further, the court ordered that the man be ordered to leave Yarmouth and never return. That's a good reason to leave. They beat you. Oh, hello! I usually don't have to put in here. Yeah, we're just going over some matter of books. I'm really bad at reading out loud, but I don't think there's any documentation of these stories. In the playlist, there's the matter of mystery and the matter of murder. Those also have stories in them. And yeah, we're just going to go over these for right now and read about for half an hour. And then, yeah, see some of the artwork in here. All right. July 12th, 1803. Louis Blanchard, a surveyor for the highway in Yarmouth County, was brought before the general session held at Vengeance House. Vengeance House, I think, is in Book 2. Apparently that was haunted. Well, named like that, it wouldn't be. Or John Richard's Tavern. Blanchard was charged for mishandling money, or at least a failure to properly account for public funds. The charge stated that he was to appear before the court and account for public money placed in his hands and shown cause why he should not be fined for not making return according to law. The case was held before Justice John Crawley, Benjamin Bernard. One second. Okay, that was Benjamin Turfry. Okay, another person. You have a lot of short names here. Short list of names, so sometimes you get mistaken of who's been murdered and who's not. Where was I? Okay. Yeah, that'd be 100 years before that guy. Okay. Benjamin Bernard, Samuel Marshall, and James Kelly. Blanchard snubbed the court and more or less told them to leave him alone. In fact, it was said that he read from a paper which he took from his pocket during the hearing. From this, he told the court that he had spoke with two gentlemen who were learned in law on the subject, and that they had advised him to pay no attention to the business. Then Blanchard told the court that he would pay his last guinea and the last drop of his blood in defense of the cause. After that, he abruptly left the courtroom, telling the justice that they may do as they pleased. Nothing apparently happened, and no further record was given. However, we do know that Blanchard was never again a highway surveyor in the county, and his name did not reappear on the list of offices in the township. Probably a good idea. Meeting at Richard's Tavern or the Vengeance House, another special session was called. This time, Benjamin spelled wrong. Bernard, Joseph Edmond, and Samuel Marshall sat as justice. It was an interesting case that involved a woman charging a man for stealing an axe. From what we can determine, it was the first time that a woman prosecuted a case in Yarmouth County. The man, in his own defense, told the court that she had owed him 21 shillings. He kept the axe, which was worth 4 shillings and 11 pence, until she paid the bill. It was shown in court that the woman did owe him the money, but the court ruled in favor of the woman, and in giving judgment stated the felonious intent of the prisoner together with his former suspicious character resulted in the accused being found guilty. As punishment, the accused man was ordered to have 39 lashes on the lashing post in front of the Vengeance House. The woman was ordered to pay the constable 21 shillings less 10 shillings, which she said the axe was worth, in obvious disagreement with the man's estimate, or 11 shillings, which was to be given to the man. As for the axe, from this record, we assume he was allowed to keep it. 1810. Justice Samuel L. Poole, Joseph N. Bond, Benjamin D'Entremont, and H.J. Frasher held a case in which Mulatto, Mulatto, girl named Harriet was accused of stealing a piece of ribbon worth 9 pence. She pled not guilty to the charge and told the court that she would be tried by God and her country. Even so, Judge Foreman Rufus Hubbard announced that the jury had found her guilty and charged. The court sentenced her to receive 12 lashings on her bare back by the sheriff as soon as possible. Different times. Obviously, during this year, a lawyer by the name of Butch B-U-C-H, Butchanine, was having some difficulties in the area. At a close of a trial before the court, a man was sentenced to pay a fine of 2 without the O, apparently, shillings spelled with the O, and 4 pence for assaulting the lawyer sometime earlier. Then the next case involved a prominent citizen of Argyll who was also charged with assaulting the same lawyer. He was fined 1 shilling and 3 pence. Lawyer Burchin was not satisfied with the latter decision and accused the same prominent citizen of yet another assault. This time the matter went before the jury and the prominent citizen was found not guilty. 1817. Even justices were not spared the harsh justice of early Yarmouth. Apparently, from the record, a justice of magistrate of the town was brought before Justice Samuel S. Poole, James Lent, John N. Bond, H.G. Farish, and Benjamin Bernard. He was charged for breach of the peace for having presented to the court a writing containing the following words: "My wife does not understand writing." It was then told to the court that he made the woman sign this writing by having her make her mark or cross and then using the note for personal gain like a petty forge. It was stated at the trial that a magistrate who acts thusly should be stripped of his commission as a judge, and therefore have otherwise behaved in a contemptuous manner to the court. It was ordered that said judge be committed to the district jail for 5 days or until he finds grants surely for his good behavior. Yeah, this is why nobody comes to my readings. In 1822, a new law was passed for the residents of the people of Argyll, that for every thistle that shall be allowed to ripen to seed, the owner of the land wherein such thistle shall grow shall pay a fine of 6 pence for each additional thistle, until the sum amount of 20 shillings and no more, including the middle of the highway or road frontiering said land. Jesus, finding you for weeds. Ooh, the Hanging Oak. I've never been there, but I've gone by it a few times. The Hanging Oak of Tusket, Nova Scotia. The Hanging Oak is a landmark of the Tusket village of which was once known Lent's Corner. The Lent family originated from the state of New York and arrived in Nova Scotia, landing in Shelburne on October 31st, 1783. From there, they went directly to Tusket village, where they received land grants. Including these land grants was a section of lot along the Tusket River. This was important to James Lent, as he was a fisherman by occupation. Even though Lent lived in the village for a number of years before, it wasn't officially marked lot number 2, his lot, until 1809. Founded on this lot with an oak tree. This oak tree is now known as the Hanging Oak. Throughout the years, many theories and stories on how this tree acquired its name have been told. One story says that a man was hung from that tree with a noose around his neck. Gordon Wood, Tusket. As a child, Gordon Wood was constantly told that people, such as slaves, were put to their death by hanging hanging them on the gnarled oak tree in the Tusket known as the Hanging Oak. Hanging Oak. Gordon had said that he always had some reservation in believing these stories. He noticed that as he grew older, what people said about the tree changed. They started saying that there was never really anyone killed in Tusket and that the whole legend was a myth. Some citizens said the oak got its name from the settlers who used to hang their meat out to dry on the tree. Mr. Wood's philosophy of the legend was that there could have been a hanging on that tree, but the people of the village didn't want their community to archive a bad name, so they made up stories to cover it up. Don Potter, Tusket. Mr. Potier, P-O-T-H-I-E-R, Potter, Potier, said that in his studies of the Tusket village, there was never any proof found which confirmed the belief that people had actually been hung on that tree. I am 99% certain that no one was ever hung on the tree, said Poche, added that it was more likely to be a myth. He also said that in his studies of the area, the only fact that had come up about the tree was that it was used to hang meat to cure. Mr. Potter mentioned that he knew that some people thought that the reason the tree was called the Hanging Oak was because they believed that the first settlers to come to Tusket tied their boats there. Karen Cuttrow, Tusket, owner of the store The Hanging Oak. Karen's mother told her as a young girl that people who committed crimes against the English king were hung from that tree. Karen's own story, obtained from her own research, was very much similar to Gordon Wood's and Don Poche's story. Although there was no actual proof that there was a hanging at the tree in the village of Tusket, it is believed that many of the people that in fact a death occurred under the branches of the oak. It is the belief of many people that in fact a death occurred under the branches of the old oak. Without being able to retrieve the necessary records, it is impossible for us to determine exactly why the tree is called the Hanging Oak. Early facts about the Hanging Oak. The land where the oak tree now grows is on the land that was once habited and owned by James Lent, 1784. Colored slaves, which were just one will do, which were brought with Lent from New York, were tied to the tree and whipped as punishment for having done something wrong. The hanging oak was used for curing and drying meats. Some boats used to tie their anchors to anchor themselves to shore. No records of anything before 1790 were kept. James Lent was a very prominent citizen. James Lent, being a justice to the peace, had the authority of a judge. He had 3 sons and a daughter who succeeded him. There is no defiant evidence that anyone was put to death by being hung on the hanging oak tree. There we go. How long is this one? This one's pretty long. Been going. All right, we're going to do this one. And, pardon my neck. That'll be it for today, and we'll do more another day. There's the artwork. The Murder of Carol and Suzanne Hilton. The story of the life of who? E-B-E-N-E. Ebenezer? Ebenezer. I've never actually seen that word spelled. I thought it was going with Elizabeth. Okay. The story of the life of Ebenezer Hilton was a tragic case of abuse, violence, and murder. He had little or no education and worked as a common laborer in the area. Of the Hiltons, the local media wrote, the family, particularly outlaws in the community, wretches brought upon in ignorance, are despised by the neighbors and shunned as though they were lepers, and have been more or less in the public eye for years. Despised by the neighbors. The Hiltons lived in South Ohio in utter poverty. The entire family lived in a small shack which was divided into small compartments. It was located about a mile in a northeasterly direction from the modern-day South Ohio corner. The shack had once been used to house animals, similar to a barn. Residents often referred to it as having a lean-to type construction. In the shack lived Ebenezer Hilton, who was 38 years of age in 1908. With him was his wife Susan, a number of children, and his mother, who was 88. The exact number of children living in the shack is uncertain. It is believed that there was as many as 6 children who at times lived in the shack with their spouses. So, on the surface, the Hiltons' home was a very busy place. To many of the more settled and proper families in the community, the Hiltons were a sorry lot indeed. On January 11th, 1908, Ebenezer's mother, Carolyn, was conducting her daily chores, one of which was to take the straw sack up, which she slept and air it out on a fence behind the shack. When she went to return the straw sack to the house, she fell down and was unable to carry the sack inside. At 88 years of age, it is believed that the sack was a little too much for her to handle on her own. As a result, Carolyn Hilton left the sack in the yard. When Ebenezer left the sack with his son-in-law, James Doucette, to chop wood, he saw the sack lying on the ground. Ebenezer had an axe in his hand. He immediately flew into a rage, stormed into the shack, and demanded to know who had left the straw sack laying carelessly in the yard. Carolyn Hilton admitted to this. Ebenezer exploded and began to beat her with the handle of his axe. He beat her over the arms and shoulders. Carolyn Hilton cried pitifully and groaned for her son to please stop his brutal assault on her frail, aging body. Seeing no reprieve, Carolyn Hilton tried to flee the shack and struggled to run into the yard, but the more youthful and agile Ebenezer viciously chased her. Ebenezer pushed her to the ground and began to fiercely kick Carolyn about her body and head. After Ebenezer was finally finished, his son-in-law helped the severely beaten old lady back into the shack. James Doucette did not dare to interfere with the beating as he feared that Ebenezer would turn on him. Meanwhile, over the next few hours, Carolyn Hilton struggled to survive with her injuries she sustained at the hands of her brutal son. Finally, her aged body gave way and she died of her injuries. When Reverend Dr. Joseph Sanders, the Baptist clergyman in Ohio, heard about the death, he refused to permit the body be interred until a coroner inquest was convened. The following served on the jury: Moses E. Saunders, foreman; James Allen, E.M. Patton, A. Blackard, George W. Moses, Jordan R. Cook, John Crosby, Nathan F. Moses, Joseph Pittman, John Ellis, Edward Vickery, and J. Calvin Kane. An investigation was consequently held, led by Coroner A.M. Perrin, M.D. There was sufficient evidence presented to the inquest to warrant the arrest of Ebenezer Hilton. A preliminary inquiry was held a short time later, and he was committed to stand trial. During the trial, it was shown that Ebenezer had threatened his mother several times and had actually abused her for the past 25 years. Testimony was presented to the magistrate by Ebenezer's wife, Susan, his daughter, Janice Doucette, and son-in-law, James Doucette. Ebenezer was found guilty of the assault and was sentenced to 5 months in the Yarmouth jail. After the incident, many efforts were made by the church and the community to try and help this wretched family. especially the young children. Unfortunately, none of these efforts were successful, and the family remained in a downward spiral of poverty and abuse. The children neglected their schooling, and there were constant reports of their truancy. Unfortunately, the death of 88-year-old Carolyn Hilton was not to be the only tragic event for the family. On Tuesday, April 23rd, 1914, Ebenezer and his wife Susan had been engaged in a fierce argument. This was a very common occurrence during the several months leading up to this date. That evening's quarrel began when Ebenezer had asked his wife earlier in the day for some money, which she had. Susan Hilton refused this request from her husband. Later, Ebenezer had given another resident of Ohio a bill of sales on a heifer which his wife claimed belonged to her. Because of this, Susan Hilton threatened to have her husband arrested. It is suggested that Ebenezer was upset that his wife initially refused him the money. So, in what appears to have been a desperate bid for the money, he stole his wife's heifer and kept the proceeds for the sale for himself. This was the catalyst which started a series of arguments that would end in tragedy. Later that evening, Susan Hilton had gone to bed. She was fully clothed. Ebenezer then entered the room and proceeded to jump on the bed and trample her. As a result of this, Susan Hilton was very badly bruised about the abdomen and limbs. A little while later, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, Susan got up and went to the kitchen. Ebenezer was there, and the argument resumed. The argument shifted away from money matters to an oil lamp, which Ebenezer claimed to be his property. Susan Hilton argued that it was hers. After some words had been exchanged between them, Ebenezer knocked the glass chimney off the lamp. It subsequently smashed on the floor. It is uncertain whether this was an accident or a deliberate act. From the media reports, it could be either. This ruckus woke some of the children, who wandered out of their room to see what was happening. Ebenezer, a few steps away from Susan, shouted, "Take it to hell with you," hurling the oil lamp at his wife's face. When it struck, the lamp shattered and inflicted 11 severe slashes on her face. Some of these were deep to the bone. One of the cuts to the nose went clear to the cartilage and almost completely severed the lower part of her nose. Also, when the lamp hit, the illuminated oil spread all over her clothes, and she simultaneously burst into a mass of flames. The children were in shock as they witnessed their beloved mother on fire. The children tried to smother the flames with a raincoat. They were successful, but it was too late. Susan Hilton was already frightfully burned. Her hair had been burnt completely off her head. Her arms and shoulders and abdomen were almost completely cooked or charred. The children carried their mother, who was still alive, to a cooler part of the shack. Another children ran off to get Dr. Zadok Hawkins. Dr. Hawkins arrived shortly thereafter and attended to the suffering woman, but Susan Hilton was so severely injured that Hawkins could do little more than make her comfortable as possible in the few remaining hours of her life. Then, after about 24 hours of unbearable pain, Susan Hilton finally died. A coroner's inquest was immediately convened again under the direction of coroner Dr. A.W. Perrin. Members serving including Ross B. Allen, foreman, Asa Wyman, J.A. Ellis, Benjamin Simons, Dr. Hawkins, Reverend J.W. Hogan, Albert Blackadar, Ignace Porter, N.H. Moses, Benjamin Porter, Gordon Cook, and Osborne Churchill. There was sufficient evidence found to have Ebenezer Hilton charged with manslaughter. He then had a preliminary inquiry and ended up in trial before Justice of the Nova Scotia Supreme Court. As a result, Ebenezer was sent to trial for the death of his wife. The charge was manslaughter. At the trial, before Strip and Stripnary, Stipendary, Magistrate Charles S. Hilton, another Hilton, but another one, a number of witnesses gave evidence. Usually for this time period was the fact that the trial was held behind closed doors. The witnesses included the children, Martin, Frank, Melvin, Austin, as well as Lizzie Hilton. The judge ordered the room cleared, presumably so that the children could freely give the evidence to the court. In addition, Mrs. Linda Crosby and Dr. Hawkins gave extensive evidence. With the overwhelming amount of evidence and witness presented by the Crown Attorney R.S. McKay, Ebenezer was found guilty in spite of what was reported as some conflicting evidence. Ebenezer was defended by R.W.E. Landry, a well-known Yarmouth lawyer who was assisted by E.N. Clements. Ebenezer Hilton was sentenced to serve 15 years in Dorchester Penitentiary. The local media reported that the juror decision must have been an easy one, since it only deliberated for 25 minutes. Local residents around South Ohio were very upset with local media reports suggesting that the community was not caring or concerned about the welfare of the Hilton family. Reverend Hogan wrote to the editor of the Yarmouth Times on April 28, 1914, "It seems very strange and unjust to the people of Ohio that your correspondent of last week could not have found out the facts about the Hilton family before sending broadcasts over the land. Such a reflection upon the inhabitants of our village who are not more heathenish than the dwellers in the old places, were obtained to allow such things to exist, because there is no authority that allows us to go in to another's home and compel them to come to our standards of living. For many years, attempts have been made to help these people and to try and solve the problem. Perhaps, as in many others like this, we have not done all we could, but that does not go to prove that they have been shunned like lepers. On a number of occasions in years past, the home has been renovated, repaired, repainted, cleaned, and furnished with necessities, articles of furniture, stoves, bedding, chairs, and provisions stored in the pantry. At Christmas time, they were always included in good cheer. One lady in our midst interested herself to such an extent that, against many difficulties, a home was provided for one of the girls with Reverend and Mrs. Fauhay. The older ones have grown up to be respectable, industrious, and were expected to be able to take care of themselves. By accident, the home was burned. When the father made a move to secure a new home last year, the neighborhood turned out with their cattle and hauled a house, purchased in Hebron, to its present sitting. Although it took their time in a very busy season. Many attempts have been made to get the children into school, with some measure of success, as at least 2 are in attendance. At one time, a teacher from Sunday school was sent to them a Sunday after Sunday, taught them by blackboard exercises and illustration. Object learns object lessons and left them texts of scripture to copy and learn. Also, their teacher, on his own, accounted and provided them with Bibles and necessary help. Also, at least 2 of the children are attending the Sunday school at the present time. We have had no minister at any no minister at any time who has passed them by in his route of pastoral visitation. They were included in his round of calls. Ebenezer ended up serving only 8 years of his sentence and was released from Dorchester in 1922. He returned to South Ohio and went to work for Colonel Myers, who operated a substantial farm in the area. Ebenezer finally met his end in May of 1925, 3 years later, when he was working on a hay wagon. He fell off the wagon, and the horses accidentally drew their heavy load of the wagon over his chest as the wheels crushed him. He died later that day in Yarmouth Hospital. Visitors from all over Nova Scotia were in town for the funeral of J. Murray Lawson, a prominent newspaper man who served as editor of the Yarmouth Herald for 30 years. The historian of the day, familiar with Ebenezer Hilton, slapped their knee and commented, "Old Scratch got his run over by a hay wagon." Ebenezer Hilton is under a slab very near to the road in Hillside Cemetery with a marker that simply bears his name and date. His violent and almost inhumane crimes are still remembered by older residents of the community to this day. For decades, his mothers of South Ohio used his name to put fear into the hearts of their children. Be good and watch out that Ebenezer Hilton don't get you. The case is often mentioned today as an example of abuse handed out to a spouse and partner. Ebenezer Hilton, a man who will always be remembered for his extreme violence and his notorious crimes against his family. All right. I think we'll do this one tomorrow. All right. Well, if you stopped by, thanks for stopping by, and I will see you probably crafting later today.